Well, let me check and make sure this is on. Okay. Good morning and welcome to Zen Live. I had to check. The camera's not on mirror, so I had to check the other side of the iPod to see if it had gone live. Sometimes I start talking and it didn't make the connection, and I end up with nothing. So anyway, welcome to Zen Live and the crack in our cosmic egg. Today's going to be an interesting day because I'm going over to Richmond to the Heartfulness Meditation Center, which is pretty big here in Richmond. You have a big website. And I'm going to set up a dialogue with somebody there who's going to just kind of like interview me. It's going to be asking questions and see what comes up. Hopefully it'll be a insight dialogue, kind of like what we have here. But I have no idea what's going to happen. You know, there may not be anything. It may not. Sometimes for a dialogue to happen, there has to be some kind of chemistry or resonance. But the main ingredient is no agenda and no judgment. I mean, you can have a topic, but not to fit the dialogue can't fit the program. Or it's got to be open-ended. It's got to be exploratory. And you can't explore and be open-ended if there's any kind of judgment or preconceived notion of what should be said or where it should go, or any opinion conflicts. Because as soon as somebody says in dialogue, well, that isn't right, you pretty much put up a stop sign. So so anyway, I'll be curious to see how this works out, and I'll put it online if it has any value. I was asked to come in and see if I could do this, set something up. So when you're asked, it's kind of like when you're asked a question, you answer, or when you're asked to do something, you respond. So in that way, I'm okay with this because I didn't pound on the door asking them, "Oh, let me do this, let me," that's my agenda then. So if I go without an agenda, we'll see what happens. So my wife gives me lemon juice in the morning, which really gets you going good. Okay. Last night at Martini Time, I talked about the movie we just saw Friday night, and it's still going off in me like a time-release capsule. The movie was Practical Magic. It's 20 years old, with Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman. And it was a fun movie, but it was about this generational family of witches in New England that goes back to a woman who was hung, and then the rope broke and she was not hung, and so but she was a witch, and she put a curse on the family, on the Owens women. That any man that marries a Owens woman will die. And so Sandra Bullock's character, as a little girl, imagined a man, her man. She imagined a man that would not, that she would never find. So she would have no problems of anybody, any man marrying her dying. And the man she created in her imagination had a green eye and a blue eye and some other features. But anyway, so she did fall in love and get married, and the guy died. So anyway, the rest of the story was finding her green-eyed and blue-eyed man, you see. But the point of the movie, for me, was that this was basically about the resurrection of Eve, because these women passed on to the girl children not only their ability to perform magic, but also their joy in life and their play, and free from judgment. Everything was play, which is play. So when they do a curse or do a little exercise their powers, it's kind of like play. And we'll play with that and see what happens. But also there was they didn't have any, in other words, they grew up in a closed system because they were exiled from the community. The community said, "Oh, the witches," and threw rocks at them. So they were kind of like in a isolated interior place where they protected themselves, and they passed on their powers by just assuming they had them. See, there's no question. When you assume, when you just know you are this or have this ability, you just do it. But if you question it, you lose it. If you doubt it, you lose it, you see. So this, and I'm kind of like involved in that right here. In other words, I create this Facebook Live, and I just jump in. But if I doubt that I don't have the, if I can't creatively respond to this, you see, well, then I'll get a deer in the headlights. I go, I get befuddled. So befuddlement, deer in the headlights, anxiety, self-doubt, conflicted behavior comes about by doubt, fear of what other people will think. So these little witches, this witch coven, basically of aunts and daughters and parents and so forth, did not doubt their powers. And so when they needed them, they came up. They used them. But anyway, I just felt like that this movie was about the resurrection of Eve and her natural powers. Because you go back, and I was just finishing reading. I just finished this book here, and I really recommend it. It's called The Biology of Transcendence, a Blueprint of the Human Spirit by Joseph Chilton Pearce. Now, he was a lecturer and writer on children. He wrote The Magical Child, wrote The Crack in the Cosmic Egg, and I have really been inspired by his writings because he combines his own personal mystical experiences with his experiences with Swami Muktananda, who was my guru back in the late 70s, and early 80s, and his studies in the development of the brain through Piaget and all of these wonderful scientists and works who have looked at transcendence from a biological point of view. See, the problem with our Western brain is that we can only really comprehend and understand something if it's put into a rational scientific framework, material framework. No, science can't get into esoteric, it can't get into mystical, it can't get into transcendence or anything. Science has to work with the ground of facts and things arranged in a logical order. And so the West is really, we have made such much wonderful stuff and made a comfortable world out of this logic and science, but at the same time we've hollowed ourselves out. We're empty. We're spiritually and our soul is hungry, you see, because it's all been external. The world has been externalized into rational logic and cause and effect. So it's missed our own transcendence, you see. So transcendence has no logic. The unknown has no cause and effect. Emptiness has no rational reference, you see. So how do you bring these two together? And this has always been my quest, I think, and also when I find teachers who do this, I really get inspired by them. Writers and teachers who are able to explain transcendence and mystical experience in a rational way. So it brings the two brains together, the right and the left brain together, you see. If you just use one side or the other, you miss the mark. If it's all just esoteric, transcendence, mysticism, in metaphorical language, or you miss the mark. You miss the rational side. If it's all rational, cause and effect, linear science, in time, space-time, you miss the mystical. So how do you get them together? How do you put them together? We have to do that. We have to do that, you see. And so when you find a teacher that does put it together for you, another one that has really awakened me and helped me so much is Albert Lowe. Now he's a Zen master, a rational Zen master. So he's able to put Zen into a rational context. And just as Joseph Pearce is able to put scientifically justified brain development, the study of the brain and its growth, and the stages of its evolution, from the reptilian brain to the frontal lobe, you see, these two, the advanced, the evolutionary frontal lobe versus the reptilian brain. And so he also has done most of his life work on the study of natural childbirth versus the intrusion of hospital births, and how that hospital births break up the bond, the natural bond of the mother and child. And once that bond is broken, the child then has to adapt to a artificial or cultural field, which is today, our culture is at war with nature. So there's the child is put into a double bind between answering his nature, his true nature, or responding, obeying the culture. And they don't mesh. So anyway, I don't want to get into that. But I do want to get to the resurrection of Eve. And I really love this, the movie's title, Practical Magic. Practical Magic. That just, because, and again, I talked about this last night, but I got to pick it up again. Practical magic. Like most of us say, well, magic is not practical. Oh, you have a rabbit in a hat, it's got entertainment, but it's not and practical means, can I do it? You see, magic means, well, the magician can do it. And I'm sure it's an illusion, it's a trick, and we try to make the magic rational. What's he doing? What's he doing? There's got to be a rational explanation. You see, that's when we see magic, immediately, well, first of all, we're attracted to magic because it's not rational. How did he do that? Now we got a Zen cone. Now we got a puzzle. I got to figure out how he made that. What's the rational basis for that, you see? What's the reference to it? And, of course, the magician doesn't want to reveal his trick, but maybe it's not a trick. We don't know, you see. And so so anyway, even Jesus started that way. His miracles were magic acts, you see. And so how do we incorporate that into a rational world? Well, the church incorporated it into the rational world of the church by saying, well, Jesus was God, so he could do that. But you can't, you see, because you're not Jesus. Jesus was God, and you're fallen. So you got to go through Jesus to get to the magic. You have a mediator. The church is your magic. So right away, just like the separation of the mother and child by the intervention of the hospital, snatching the baby out, cesarean, put it in a basket away from the mother, under bright lights, and there's no faces for the baby to bond to. It's got a mask on it, you see. And this, of course, it's getting a lot better, but it used to be hospital birth was very intrusive and clinical. And the mother was drugged, and maybe a couple of days later, she gets to see the baby. The damage is already done. So this medical institution intervenes and breaks up this natural bond. And so with Jesus, so Jesus does miracles in order to demonstrate what you can do, in order to demonstrate your practical magic. But then the church intervenes and says, no, you can't do the practical magic. You need, Jesus can do it because he was God and only one, you see, the only begotten Son. So there is no other sons. He's it, and he can do the magic, but you can't. So you need the church. So it's only through the church that you get the magic, you see. So just like the hospital intervened between the mother and child, the church intervened between you, me, and Jesus and separated us, you see. So it's called culture. Joseph Pearce is really big in understanding culture, and I've been talking about that lately. Culture as the big culture that includes religion and state. The whole works. Everything that we're born into and believe and refer to for meaning is culture. Even today, everything that happens is given meaning by culture. This is the big problem with the mass shooters, particularly the Las Vegas shooter. We can't find any meaning to it. There's no reference in culture that gives meaning to the mass shooter. Was he ISIS? Was he disturbed? You see, who was? No, he doesn't fit any category. He's the mass shooter is like the obelisk in Space Odyssey 2001. What is it? The obelisk, if you remember, appears to the apes, appears to the astronauts, appears to the astronaut on his transcendent journey. So whenever the obelisk appears, there is a evolutionary leap, because the obelisk has no reference to the known. It's there, but it has no reference. It's like an alien. It's like magic. There's no reference to it. It doesn't fit. You can't make it logically, you can't make logical sense out of it. There's no cause and effect. Nothing caused it. When something happens that has no cause, we call it's magic or a miracle. But does that mean that it has no cause? Or does it mean our reality map is too small? Does it mean that it has no cause, rational cause, or does it just mean that we need a bigger boat? Now I see movies as metaphorical maps to giving us a bigger boat. A good example, that phrase comes from Jaws. Jaws, I use the meme all the time with the guy turning and looking with the cigarette in his mouth, and Jaws is behind. He says, we're going to need a bigger boat. That's what the whole movie was about. We can't understand this Jaws coming up from the unconscious that's eating us. What is this dark force coming up out of and the water is always the unconscious and the conscious, Boom. The water, the ocean, the lake, the pond is always the unconscious. And what's down there we can't see, but it comes up, you see. Eckhart Tolle calls it the pain body. Comes up to feed on us, you see. So the movies are maps that give us a transcendent link to a bigger map, a bigger understanding. And we can either choose to go there or not. We can either just look at the movie as entertainment about in other words, we just look at the movie in sense of just the content, the entertainment, the story, or we have a metaphorical connection to something larger that's sensed. It's something opens up that is not thought. It opens up kind of like as a bigger picture, a bigger meaning, you see, a bigger map of reality that includes that transcends culture. So this idea of transcendence, and that's what Pearce gets back to, the biology of transcendence. The biology of course, biology is science. Biology is a science, and it's in a revolution because all of our instruments and all of our laboratories and everything, and our technology is is pushing greater and greater maps. We're on the edge of greater understanding, a bigger boat, you see. So anyway, my bell rang, but getting back to the topic, the resurrection of Eve and practical magic. So practical magic is the practice of transcendence, the practice of getting a bigger boat, the practice of getting a bigger understanding. And that practice is activated by the question, what's the truth here? I don't know. My map doesn't include it. What's the truth here? So Eve, practical magic, is resurrected with the question, I don't know. What's the truth here? I'm curious. What's the truth here? So anyway, I'm curious about my talk today at 2 o'clock, and also everything that we perceive in the world can open up to a bigger boat if we're curious. If we're not, we're just looking at yesterday reenacting itself in today. Nothing new here. But everything is really new. But you have to have some practical magic. So anyway, thank you for dropping in.